Salve te discipuli. This is help for your Latin studies in Henle First Year Latin. Exercises 104 and 105. We're just getting into Unit 3, learning about verbs. And to start off the unit, there's a bit of reading that tells us about verbs in Latin. The first point is that verbs change their form to express time. Present, past, or future tense. There's also, as we read on, it says verbs change their form to express person, as in first, second, and third person. That would be I, you, he, she, it, we, you all, or they. And then also verbs change their form to express different numbers, so they can be singular or plural. And then we get into reading about the principal parts of verbs. And it lists what those principal parts are here. The first person, singular, present, indicative, active. So this is just first person, singular, and present tense. And then there's the present, infinitive, active. This is going to be like to plus a verb in English. To praise, you see here, laudare means to praise. Laudo, backing up a minute, I praise. And then there's number 3, there's the first person singular, perfect, indicative, active. Laudavi, I praised. That perfect is kind of indicating that it's a completed action. It's perfected, it's done. So I praised, it's done, I did it. And then the fourth principal part is the perfect participle passive. So having been praised, laudatus. So these are like the past participle verbs as you would think about them in English. And it tells us here that the verbs of the first conjugation are those that belong, or that present infinitive active ending is A with a macron, RE. So anytime you see this form number 2, the infinitive form, end in ARE, then that is of the first conjugation. Because just like nouns have different declension families, verbs have different conjugation families. And so we're going to start by learning about verbs of the first conjugation. And we will identify them just as we identified our noun families by looking at the genitive singular ending. We will identify our verb families by looking at that infinitive form ending. And again, ARE is the first conjugation. We'll remember that because A is the first letter of the alphabet, and that's the only conjugation family that begins with A. Okay, so with that in mind, we come up on exercise 104, and in this exercise, it says it wants us to identify verbs that belong to the first conjugation. So simply, we need to look at our list of verbs that are given here and find the ones that end, that has the infinitive ending A-R-E. And so there are several in there. And so I would have you just list them out. And I'll give you the very first one, laudare. You see that A with a macron, R-E ending. So that verb belongs to the first conjugation. And then you keep going through. If this one doesn't, you'll skip over it. If the next one does, write it down and so forth. So that's exercise 104, easy enough. And then exercise 105 asks us to give the principal parts of these first conjugation verbs. Well, there is a pattern, and I'm going to have you look at the grammar book now. On page 40 is where it starts talking about verbs. And again, it just kind of breaks down into rule form the things that have been introduced in the reading of the book. It talks about voice and mood and tense, number and person, and then conjugation. And on the next page, it talks about the 4 different conjugations. You see them here. You see that the first conjugation is that which ends has the infinitive form ending in are. And then it lists the principal parts. There are 4 parts of the verb called principal parts because all the others are formed on them or on their stems. And these parts are this. And it kind of, we talked about these from the reading. This is just abbreviating what they are again. But the endings of the first conjugation are going to be o, are, awi, and atus. So when you list out the endings, notice it's always loud, 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 loud. That's the stem. We know the stem by dropping the ending in the infinitive form, are, and then we can switch that around. So we would take the stem and add those various endings. Okay, so, and here, this will also help. This note here, most verbs of the first conjugation form their principal parts by changing the O of the first principal part to are, awi, atus. Thus, laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatus. And you don't write them with the hyphen. They're just emphasizing that ending, the ending from the stem. And so in exercise 105, it asks us to give the principal parts of the first conjugation verbs occupo, opugno, and oro. So we would want to take that O and change it each time to list all 4. Occupo, occupare, occupavi, occupatus. I'll write that one down and leave the other 2 to you so that you can see how that would look. Okay, so you have occupo, occupare, occupavi. Oh, and those are macrons over the A and the I. And then occupatus. And those are the 4 principal parts of the verb. We will come to understand more about how those principal parts of the verb work in sentences as we continue to dig into Latin. But for now, we just really want to memorize those endings and how they would change between those different verbs in the first conjugation. So go ahead and write out the endings for the other 2 verbs in the same way. Go ahead and identify all of the verbs of the first conjugation from exercise 104, and then you can move on. And I hope you have a great week.